We've been looking at the story of Hannah from 1 Samuel chapter 1. Hannah, you'll remember, was married to a man named Elkanah. Elkanah loved Hannah, but he also had another wife named Peninnah, whom he didn't love as much. One difference between these two women was that Peninnah was able to have children, and Hannah was unable to have children. I think that's something that is troubling to some of us when we read through this passage, is that twice in the first 6 verses, it refers to the fact that the Lord had closed Hannah's womb. And I think that when we think about that, it can seem mean. Like, what is God doing? Why is he preventing her from having children? But I think we have to understand this in the broad picture of God's sovereignty. That there are reasons that God has that we don't always understand why all of our desires are not met, and why we go through things that are difficult, which for Hannah was this inability to have children. It reminds me of the verses in Isaiah 55, which say this: "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." It's very difficult when you are in a situation like Hannah was, where the desire of her heart was for a child, and she had been unable to conceive. It's very difficult in those situations to just say, well, God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts. God's ways are higher than our ways. And yet, the Bible calls us again and again to put our trust in the God who knows all, in the God who loves us, in the God who does all things well, and who does things for our good and for his glory. Elizabeth Elliot was a woman who knew a lot of tragedy in her life. Her husband was one of the 5 missionaries who were killed back in the 1950s as they were trying to present the gospel to a people group in Ecuador. And through a series of circumstances that really had nothing to do with the spread of the gospel, her husband lost his life. She eventually went back and ministered to those people. Elizabeth married again and outlived her second husband, and I believe she even outlived her third husband. She was a woman who knew grief. And she said this: "Some of God's greatest mercies are his refusals. He says no in order that he may, in some way we cannot imagine, say yes." And I think that there's a great deal of insight in that. It's not that God is mean. It's not that God is stingy, that he's withholding. It's that he often says no so that at some point he gives us a better yes. Now, that doesn't mean he says no to one job and because we're going to get a better job. It doesn't mean that he says no to one financial blessing because we're going to get a bigger financial blessing. It doesn't mean that he says no to healing because we're going to get a better healing. It's because his plans are eternal. And sometimes he says no so that in this eternal plan, there is a better yes as we grow in our trust of him. So today I would encourage you to take some time to think about, what area do you struggle in where maybe God has said no, where there's some desire you have, but God isn't giving it to you. And you've been praying like Hannah, but your prayers don't seem to be being answered in the way that you would like them to be answered. Take some time to think about that, and then lay that concern before God. Be honest with him in your emotions in the way that we've seen Hannah be honest. Let him know the sorrow you feel. But then let's try and wrap up that prayer by saying, "But God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust that your ways are higher than mine. that your thoughts are bigger than mine. And I'm going to trust you for a yes in your eternal plan, even if I'm not getting a yes to my prayer today.